Okay, so I think we're just about ready to go. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Andy Tudor. I'm the CEO of Collect. I'm delighted to welcome you to a webinar in association with our Collect Innovation Hub partner, Hypergroup, and two clients of ours, Studio Retail and Axminster Tools. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Ian Shepherd, who is the author of The Average is Always Wrong and Reinventing Retail. And the theme of our webinar today is about building customer value by putting data at the heart of your business. I'd just like to say a few words about the participants and then hand over to Ian for the first part of our session. So Ian's an experienced CEO and CMO and has held roles in a range of world-class consumer brands, including Sky, Vodafone, Game and Odeon. Ian's launched loyalty programs, built new digital revenue streams for traditional online retailers, and turned declining market share into stellar growth. Ian divides his time now as a thought leadership author and as a non-executive director for Benson's for Beds. Ian's going to offer us the benefit of his wealth of experience and his practical advice for how brands can leverage data to optimal effect. Ian's kindly offered a discount on his book, a code for which will be available at the end of the webinar. Next will be James, and James is going to introduce Collect and our passionate belief that becoming data-driven is an imperative for retail businesses. Our business has been founded by data experts and retail industry experts with a quest to enable retail brands to leverage the data that they have to enhance the customer and product life cycles in a cost-effective way that adds immediate value. After James, we'll hear from Damien Norcombe at Axminster Tools. Axminster is a family-run business built on a foundation of strong, award-winning customer service values. Founded nearly 50 years ago, the business is now a market leader in providing high-quality, value-for-money specialist tools and machinery to both end consumers and businesses alike. Damien will share his experiences from the journey which Axminster Tools are going through to become a truly data-driven organisation. And finally, I'm delighted to be able to share Tom at Hypergroup and Ed at Studio Retail's experience. Working together, Hypergroup and Studio Retail are using data and data science in some spectacular ways to drive up customer lifetime value. Now, I'd encourage the audience, please, to submit any questions that you've got for our panelists through the chat function in the webinar, which you'll be able to see at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to facilitate some Q&A at the end of the session, so please send in some questions for the panelists, and we look forward to be able to responding to those towards the end of the session. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ian to get us going. Thanks very much indeed for participating, everybody.
Well, Andy, thanks so much for that introduction. Let's see if we can get through the first technology challenge of sharing the screen. I'm optimistic that you're now all looking at my slides. Yeah, look, building value from data, what a fantastic topic for us to be talking about today, particularly today, I think, because there are so many business conversations happening around right now, which are about crisis management and about emergency cash flow planning, that it's refreshing to be talking about something that might actually represent incremental profit. And I agree with the kind of fundamental thesis of the session today, which is there is incremental profit. There is a huge opportunity in becoming data-centric for businesses of all sorts of shapes and sizes. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. You were very kind to introduce me in the way you did, and one thing that people will have heard from that is that I have a slightly odd background. I'm mostly in business to consumer businesses, but broadly speaking, the first half of my career was in subscription businesses like Sky TV. And in those subscription businesses, there's an interesting thing about data, because you have data. Of course, you've got your subscriber database kind of out of the box. You also have a huge financial imperative to do something with that data. So predicting churn, bad debt, figuring out which products to present to which customers, all of those are big opportunities. And so many of the things that we're going to talk about today that are now badged as machine learning and data science were in some senses pioneered in subscription businesses 20 or 30 years ago. And so that was a great kind of learning experience, and meant that I've spent the second half of my career in retail and hospitality businesses asking largely annoying questions about data. So how do we know that, and what data do we have, and how can we get kind of value from it? And so And it's that juxtaposition that really probably led to the publication of The Average is Always Wrong, in which what I'm trying to do, I suppose, is both demystify some of the data-centric stuff, to demystify some of the terminology and kind of get under the skin of that, but also as somebody who's kind of sat around, you know, boardrooms quite a lot talking about this stuff, to help businesses with, you know, what can often be the very challenging process of turning data into profit, of actually making it, of actually changing the business and making data matter. So that's what the, you know, that's what the book is about, and it begins as you would expect, you know, by having some fun with the concept of data and analytics itself. So just to give you a flavor of that, I begin the book with the sort of hypothetical line from a marketing presentation: our customers visit us 2.3 times a month. And we've all heard some line like that in a business presentation somewhere. And it's very easy to move straight from there to the conversation about, well, how do we make it 2.4 times a month then? So we've sort of absorbed the idea that we are a slightly less than once a week visit for our customers, and what could we do to get them to come back more frequently? And that might be true, you know, that might be a legitimate conversation to have, but equally what you might have is, you know, a relatively small chunk of customers who visit you every day, and a much larger group of customers who come very infrequently. And that can add up to 2.3 times a month average just as easily as the first scenario, but it's going to lead to a very different strategic conversation. So those customers who are visiting us very, very frequently, what is it we're getting right with those customers? How could we recruit more people like them? And those customers who are visiting very infrequently, you know, do they just only buy our product very infrequently, or are they actually just as frequent purchasers, but they're buying from our competitors? In which case, what's that telling us and what do we do about it? So really the strategic value in this customer visit frequency stat is in the detail, not in the average. And that would be just as true if we were talking about how many weeks of stock we hold, or you know, what our lead times are, or what our customer satisfaction levels are, or talking about operational metrics in our warehouse. So in the book, I offer you the kind of the broad contention that actually the value in data is almost always in the detail. It's very rarely in the summary headline statistics. It's in the variances. It's in the pockets of customers or stock or stores or salespeople or, you know, other operational metrics which look a bit different to everything else. And that's what, you know, that's where the value is. It's also where some of the weird terminology comes from, because many of the buzzword techniques, the machine learning and the neural networks and the data science and the topics that we throw around now and bamboozle each other with, are essentially, when you get to the heart of them, ways of unpicking that complexity, ways of you know, looking at the odd, granular weirdness of our data rather than simplifying it into overall statistics. And by doing so, really finding the value, finding the areas where there's a below average thing that I can bring up to the average, or there's an above average thing which I can learn from and try and raise everything else up to. So you know, there is, I mean, complex analytics is complex. That's why you know, we work in the ecosystems that we're going to spend some time talking about in this session today, with experts and partners who bring value to the table. But it is also, in the end, conceptually, the simple exercise of really understanding the granularity of our data. So great, but if it's a simple exercise, why is it that most of the people I talk to in business about data look like this guy? And you know, I use the example in The Average is Always Wrong about, and it's an amalgam of a bunch of different experiences I had talking to CEOs and other kind of business leaders about data, which is that they would say that very few of them are going to say, oh, you know, there's nothing in data, we don't believe in that. That's, you don't get that feedback very often. Everybody understands at some level that data is important, but what people end up saying is, yeah, I sort of knew that, and we kicked off a project to bring all our customer data into one place, and we kicked off a project to launch something that would gather new data. We put a loyalty card in the market, for example, and we've hired some data scientists, and we put out new tools on the desktop for lots of our executives so that they could interrogate and understand the data. We've done all that. And yet somehow, despite having done all of that, I don't think it's actually made any difference to our profit. So we're missing something. What are we getting wrong? And that is a use case, an example that I hear kind of time and time again. This sort of creeping sense of, you know, we're doing the work, but we're not getting the outcome that we want. And so that's really the second half of the book is about that. And it's worth really embracing why is it that we're not necessarily getting value from data in the way we wanted to? Because when you do get it right, the world is so very different. Because I've also had, you know, the great good fortune of working with and talking to businesses that I think are genuinely data centric, and they do extraordinary things. These are businesses that you know, can't really look at a summary statistic without asking themselves the question about, well, what's underneath that? What's in there? And can't look at a corner of their business without asking themselves, how might we apply some data science to this in order to optimize it a little bit? And so they end up, and this is, you know, who are these people? Well, oftentimes they're the pure play e-commerce businesses, some of them founded by data scientists, all of them, you know, awash with data because, you know, that's the way e-commerce works. Sometimes they're, you know, retail businesses, but ones that have been started in, you know, in this new technological era, the AOs of the world, the Ocados of the world. And very often what you'll find in those businesses is that they've embraced data to such an extent that they're operating this, I use this phrase, champion challenger model. So they have a standard practice. They have a, you know, here's the standard website, here's the standard customer service model, here's the standard warehouse management model, you know, in every corner of the business. But they're also constantly testing those models. They're trying experiments, they're finding pools of data, they're trying to build an even more sophisticated model to divide out the data in a more granular way in order to see whether it makes any difference and drives any incremental profit. And if it does, then of course, hey presto, that becomes the new standard practice, and they move on and continue. And if it doesn't, then, well, great, we've learned something, we tried an experiment, and we move on and try something else. And they're doing that champion challenger stuff in every corner of the business. So the example one of the case studies I give in the book, and it's one that Ocado, the delivery grocery business, share very willingly, is the example of them applying a data model to inbound customer service emails to try to answer the question, well, can we spot the really urgent one? My delivery hasn't arrived, the driver's just called me and told me he's lost, or whatever. The really urgent emails that need a response right now, can we separate those from the less urgent emails that we might take an hour or two to come back on? And you can imagine exactly the exercise they did. They took a whole basket of historical emails, some of which had turned out to be urgent, some of which had not. And they used everything else they could find about those emails, the language that was in them, the lots of natural language processing stuff going on in there, the length of them, the time of day they were sent, all the data they had about those emails to say, can we build a model that would correctly divide the emails into the urgent ones and the less urgent ones? And sure enough, they could. And of course, as a result of doing that and implementing that becoming the new standard practice in their business, then, you know, their customer service standards have improved and their cost of handling customers has reduced because they've been able to optimize in that way. So this is not just, you know, data centricity, not just something that applies to the marketing department, not just something that is, well, which email should we send to which customers, or what marketing messages should we send out to which customers. It's something that applies to the stores that you operate, the field sales teams that you have, the engineers you have, the network that you operate, you know, every corner of the business. And so the hallmark of the data-centric business really in my definition is that, you know, that sort of data analytical mindset is itself a core business practice. So great, but if we're in the same position as the guy 2 slides ago, how do we get there? How do we become a business that's really getting value from data? And my contention is there are a couple of ingredients to that. So one is self-evidently that you need to have data and you need to have the ability to analyze that data in a sophisticated way. And that's one of the reasons why I've been really delighted to join today's session with Collect and Hyper, who, between them represent, fascinating case studies and best practice in terms of how you bring data together and what you then do with it. And that's critical because although conceptually data science, data analytic models are simple, they're not necessarily simple to do. And anybody who's done one will tell you that actually the complexity is often in the strangest things, like actually understanding that those two customer records represent the same customer. So some very granular stuff. So you need to get that bit right, either internally or with the right suite of partners. But the other thing that you need to do, and this is really where I draw on, I suppose, my experience of businesses that have both succeeded and failed to become data-centric ones and to unlock value from data. The second thing that you need to do is you need to really embrace that becoming data-centric is a very big business transformation challenge for your business. So we are, I use the example in the book. If you're drawn from retail because it's the area that I know well, but if you're the trading director of a retailer, so you're the person who decides what that retailer buys and what products they're going to be selling next year, you're a pretty senior person in that business. That's a top table job. It's a very well paid job, and you're very influential in the strategy of that business. And you've gotten there over years based on, yes, of course, based on analyzing numbers, but also based on your instincts, on your experience, on having succeeded with some stuff and learned some things and built a team. And then somebody comes along and says, well, why don't we use big data to try and tell us what product trends we should be leaning into next year? And why don't we use a machine learning model to tell us what sizes of clothes we need to put in each of our stores at the beginning of the season? And you think, well, yeah, that sounds right. But big data and machine learning, I probably, as the trading director, know less about those things than any of the people who work in my team. And the reality is that's existentially challenging. That's scary. And so when business leaders are scared by a topic, they tend to push it away. And that means either not doing it at all, which is, in the case of data centricity, a huge missed opportunity, or in some senses even worse, it means ghettoizing it in the business. We'll have some data scientists and they can sit in the corner and do their data science stuff while I get on with running the proper business. And as a result, and this is where that frustration that I've heard from so many CEOs comes from. We've done some data stuff, but why hasn't it made a difference to my business? Well, the answer is because no one in the core business has changed what they do as a result of that data. And so, the thesis in The Average is Always Wrong is that, yes, we need to be able to do the data analytics stuff, but also we need to embrace, as a management team and right through the business, going on that data centric journey. And I think that's my message. I think that's the message of the book, but it's also, I think, my message for the discussion that we have here, when we're in the Q&A and we're sharing things with each other, is that, the audience here today, I think there are people here from agency backgrounds, there are people here from businesses, small businesses, large businesses. And, the challenge that we have together, is to make both halves of that journey work, to really embrace data analytics, but to also really embrace the business change journey that clients need to go on in order to turn data into profit, which I think brings us back to the core theme of today, which is the opportunity that data really represents. So and of course, if you fancy reading a fascinating book on the topic, then you know where to look. But in the meantime, thank you, Andy, again for the invitation, being here today. I'm really fascinated to hear the case studies that are coming up. So at that point, I will shut up and let other people contribute too. Thanks very much.
Ian, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I think two points that spring to mind from what you said. The data and analytical mindset becoming a core business practice, that is the hallmarks of a data-driven business, and the management team needing to embrace going on a data-driven journey are certainly themes that will ring true as we go through the next part of the webinar. So I'm going to hand over to James from the Collect team now, who's going to give you an overview of Collect and some of the things that we're doing. Thank you, James.
Great, thanks, Andy. I'm also going to invite Damien as well to start there. Perfect. So right, let me quickly share my screen to get started. So that was brilliant. First of all, thank you for Ian for starting us off. So what I'm going to do, and Damien and I are going to do, is just give you a bit of a background to Collect first and foremost. but also Damien and the team at Axminster have very much been going on the journey that Ian described. So I'm going to give a brief background to Collect and then kind of very quickly move on to talking about Damien's journey and Damien to give a bit of background on that as well. So I guess from our side, why we've started the Collect business is, a lot of the things that Ian's talked about are really kind of, retailers are struggling with them and struggling to kind of get to grips with how they use data more effectively. And there are a few reasons really behind that. But fundamentally, we believe that data is your IP, right? It's the one unique thing in your business that other people don't have. Above and beyond your product or anything else that you do, your data is completely unique. But actually using it and leveraging it for business impact is challenging. And I'm going to talk about data in terms of two sides. First of all, the analytical piece, which is broadly speaking what Ian's talked about and given background of how do you find insights from data. But secondly, it's also the operational side of data as well internally. How do we flow data around the organisation so we can try new initiatives and really keep our business at the cutting edge of what we offer to customers. And I think the first point is, from a systems and architecture perspective, retail is actually, in our view, pretty unique amongst most industries in the sense that there's a really complex architecture that's been built up over a long period of time with multiple selling channels. And this is magnified by the fact we have legacy systems in retail that in some cases are 30, 40 years old. And it's been really difficult to get data out of their systems and start flowing it around for business value. We've also seen this whole piece, and Ian brushed on it as well, is gut feel is still kind of more prevalent than data in retailers. So too often decisions on what product to buy or who your target customers are, the personas are based on, gut feel rather than kind of data-led evidence. And I know Damien was talking about the work that Axminster are doing to kind of readdress that balance as well. There's also generally a mistrust of data internally. So you can only use data if you're really confident that the data you're looking at is accurate. I'm sure we've all experienced in retail different reports from different departments that show, different results from basically what should be the same data set. So again, we need to make sure that we kind of pull those together to give us a central view of that. And the last point is, whenever we start talking about data, inevitably the numbers and the costs seem to ramp up. First of all, in terms of actually pulling data together and the cost of actually transferring data and moving data across the business, but also secondly about hiring the right kind of skills and the right kind of people internally to do anything with data. So data scientists and data analysts inevitably attract a higher kind of day rate or price tag than other similar skills. So all of those reasons are really why we started Collect. And I think Collect is really a unique mix of people. It's former retailers like Andy, senior level retailers. We've got people who've run retail technology businesses before and have sold those businesses. But we've also got people who've worked on the data side. So you've got these three kind of groups that have come together, recognizing the problem with data in retail and to try and solve some of these challenges for retailers. And we think the time is now to do that, mainly because as Ian talked about in the previous session, data is even more imperative for retailers to understand now than it ever has been before, given some of the changes and fast-moving environment we find ourselves in. And I'm not going to mention the C word. And then past that, we're also finding technology in this space has moved forward massively over the last couple of years. And the reality is most retailers are not really using that to its fullest advantage. So without making this too much of a sales pitch, or in fact, a sales pitch at all, really what we're doing at Collect is trying to bring together all of these areas into one kind of comprehensive solution for retail businesses. So first and foremost, it's about finding your data from any source. So, that could be any system internally. We can extract data from legacy platforms or any internal source system. And really it's about bringing it all together into one place. And this is about a central pool of data, both operational and analytical. So too often these kind of projects have in the past been run as an IT project, and it's seen as an IT thing to get data together into one place, rather than a central business initiative, which has been talked about already, of how do we look at this as a business change process. And really it's about saying we need to have analytical data in one place so we can analyze it and use it to drive business results. But also we need to have operational data in one place so we can try new things, we can try new customer facing initiatives. And ultimately it becomes much easier to plug new systems in when we buy them as well. And both of those things are important when we're talking about data, to have it all in one place. So effectively what we're doing at Collect is creating what we call the Enterprise Data Hub, which is a single pool of company data for both operational and analytical basis. And it's all processed, all cleansed, and the data is ready to go to plug into either analytical systems or operational systems. And really, I guess, not to kind of turn it into too much of a cheesy marketing term, but actually we kind of see that as launch pad for innovation. So, innovation both for us, but also our partners. So internally, we provide data science skills, retail specific insights and expertise from our team, and the experience we've generated over time to help businesses, find where they can use their data more effectively. But it's also about working with partners as well. So, that's why we're so delighted to have Hypergroup joining us on this webinar, because for us, really, building true partnerships is about adding real value for retailers. So too often, I think technology vendors have talked about building APIs that they can connect into any system, which doesn't really it's not as simple, first of all, as it sounds, and doesn't really add massive value to the retailer down the line. So there is a big onus on us as technology companies to work together to deliver value for retailers. So the principle of the Collect Innovation Hub is saying that once we've got data together for our customers, we then need to offer them the ability to plug that into really innovative solutions. So it's bringing together key people from the industry to offer real value. So Hyper will talk about what they're doing later on in this webinar, and the team at Studio as well. We've got people that work with across the kind of in-store experience, OMS, visual search. There's various different providers we work with, some of which are on the screen. But most importantly as well, this is not just for technology. We've also got the London College of Fashion, with whom we're doing a lot of work with at the moment, because the onus is really on technology businesses to work with wider retail space. And it's up to us as, Collect, and we see that as being really important to kind of help with the new generation of people coming into our space so they understand data. And data is not one of those things, as Ian said, that sits on one part of the business. Fundamentally, data is involved in all decision making in the business as you move forward. So without too much ado, I'm going to pass over to Damien shortly to talk about Axminster and what the team over there are doing. I think just very quickly to finish off, from our side, we work with businesses across any industry. Retail is our focus, and in fact, there are a couple of new retail businesses working with that aren't on the screen here. But ultimately, the things we're talking about are relevant for any sector, but obviously the focus for today is on retail. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Damien and stop sharing my screen. So Damien, you can take over and share yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, James. Afternoon, everybody. So I'm the CIO for Axminster Tools. We supply tools and machinery to customers all over the world, including businesses. And we're working on a turnover of approximately 47 million. We're still family owned and run, and we offer 8 UK stores across the country. We have 14,000 active products, although probably more than that in our catalogue, including spares and accessories and so on. And we're currently dispatching around 2,000 orders per day, and that's we've seen a significant increase during the C word that we won't mention, and that's a consistent output that we're seeing for the last few months. Headcount around 280. That includes our stores. We have field sales staff and specialists who are based remotely, who go and see customers face to face. And rather uniquely, we have a manufacturing division. We make some very unique products that aren't in the market. And we have a small manufacturing facility here in Axminster who are working almost 24 hours a day to meet demand. And we're always looking for new products to bring into our portfolio. So it's just a little bit about Axminster. We're going to talk about our challenges. So I'm sure many of you probably appreciate some of the issues that we have and probably have experienced in very similar scenarios. So we were operating on many crystal reports, SQL, SSRS reports as well, and many spreadsheets. So lots of data in various spreadsheets and places. And we had one person who was dedicated to writing reports. And often he would spend a lot of time putting these together from sometimes very poorly constructed and defined specifications. And then we'd spend a lot of time going back and forth, getting that report right. And in some cases, those reports were one-time use. So, you know, lots of hours spent putting this report together, getting the data together to be used only once. You know, huge amounts of wasted time, and potentially didn't quite achieve what the person was looking for, what the requester was after. And, you know, we were seeing this time and time again. So we've always known we wanted a BI platform. How and what and how we went about it was one of the sort of more difficult and challenging questions, and something we knew that we didn't have in-house. So as you can imagine, some of the issues that we were having is all these various systems. I've used generic terms here, but trying to bring that data together in one report was almost impossible. So we'd end up creating lots of reports to facilitate that and then bring them together, often not matching, lots of VLOOKUPs, and generally very inaccurate data and not very dynamic. So constantly needing updating, constantly needing new reports written to achieve that. So this led us to go out to the market, and we wanted to empower our users to bring their reports and write their own reports without the need of technical assistance. We wanted to provide dashboards that were giving up-to-the-minute information to departments, department heads, sales and warehouse divisions. But more importantly, we wanted to give that confidence to staff in that they can make decisions from this data, knowing that it was accurate and consistent. We, as I've mentioned earlier, have many systems that we want to bring together, all of them harvesting data silos in various places, and potentially we're missing out on statistics that actually were really important to us. And like many retailers, I want to harness the power of our data. As we've mentioned, it is an asset, and possibly one of the biggest assets in the business is our data. So we approached Collect and Looker jointly. We chose them as key partners in helping us achieve this. We knew that we didn't have the expertise in-house to do the whole project, and we needed Collect to help us bring our data together and formulate a plan, store our data in the cloud, and generally assist us to get to where we are today. So we worked with Looker and Collect on a proof of concept. So we brought in one system, so one of our key ERP systems, brought the data into Snowflake. That was done relatively easily and quickly, and then we had access to Looker for a defined period of time. So what that enabled us to do is have some really in-depth workshops on our data rather than demo data. So we could really understand how we could use Looker and sort of start to see how powerful it could be. We then went out and did some customer references. So we spoke to a number of retailers, how they use Collect and Collect services, and similarly how Looker is being used in the market. So being that we had a proof of concept underway, we got the feedback from those users, those business users that have been hands-on with Looker and the data. Got their feedback, put this all together, align that with our outcomes and our objectives, and put forward a full business case to the board. So this was over a series of probably around 12 months to get to this point. And the board agreed and accepted, and we moved forward. So during that time, we've been bringing in various data sources into the Collect platform. We've then been modeling the data in Looker. So we have a key project team that are meeting on a daily basis, who are looking at what they're working on today, what's happening in the week ahead. And to this point, we've achieved a lot in the last 9-10 months. And some of the outcomes we're already seeing, I've broken this down into a customer. So we can start to prioritize the products that customers are looking for. We can see the trends in how they're being purchased, where they're being purchased, and how they're being purchased. We're very much looking forward, or looking to become a global player. We want to be sending more product abroad, reaching more customers across the globe. Some of the more sort of quicker outcomes was the ability to forecast our staff based on previous data that we've managed to bring together, and that includes our sales data, our call volumes, number of tickets that we're seeing in our CRM, number of web chats, and we can bring these together and we can know, based on this time last year, we needed this many staff to facilitate those channels of contact. So rather than someone bringing this data together in a spreadsheet, we can now forecast almost immediately. And some of the work we've been doing outside of this project, but sort of quite nicely linked with it, is to build personas. So we've put together a number of personas that we feel represent our customer base based on surveying, shopping trends, etc. And we can now start to match our customers to personas, which means that we can provide a more tailored service and start to have a greater reach on the ones that perhaps we haven't got so many of, that we want to explore and obtain those customers and engage with them. Another area that we've been working on very closely is product. It's by far our largest investment in the business, and where we're seeing different trends because of the pandemic. Products are selling more frequently. We're selling more of other products that have been slow to sell. We've also had, as many retailers would probably appreciate, is delays in the supply chain, and manufacturing has slowed, and various other challenges across the globe as we get product into the UK. So we're starting to see what I'd call a 360 degree of our product. So we can see all of the costs can be considered as part of that. So marketing, shipping, storage and handling fees are all brought in together, so we can actually truly calculate costs of a product and to get it to shelf and into the market. We're also starting to look at products that aren't working for us, so they're no longer earning their keep, as it were. This used to be a lengthy exercise when we released our catalogue, in that we would go through all of our active product lines and look at their performance over the last 12 months and decide whether they needed some additional marketing, whether they needed to be pulled from our catalogue. And rather than this as an annual event, we're now doing this as a more regular basis, so we can react to products that are starting to slow in sales and movement. We're also starting to align our customer base align our range to our customer demand. So working very much on the personas, knowing what our customer wants, we can start to improve our product range, bring in new product that customers are demanding, and certainly, as I mentioned earlier, look at how we can manufacture products here in the UK and some unique products and opportunities there. We're very much working towards an exception base. So rather than looking through reams of data, we're starting to get the systems to show us the exceptions that we should be looking at. And what I mean by that is products that are gone out of stock. We need to be on that before they go out of stock. How we can improve the supply chain to get products to us quickly. We can use data from our customer reviews to know whether a product is working, whether there's some flaw in the product through the manufacturing process that we need to jump on straight away. So bringing this data into one place allows us to do all of the above and much more. So just a summary of our outcomes. We are certainly seeing that we're becoming a much larger enterprise. We're using our data to that effect. Staff have access to data at their fingertips, and they don't need that technical know-how. They don't need the specialist scripting or anything like that. It's very much browser-based, which we're all used to generally. Spreadsheets are becoming less and less. We're seeing less use of spreadsheets in terms of exporting data and manipulating it. It's now done within Looker. And decision making is now being based on some of these reports that we're now seeing. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're very keen on is to enable and empower staff to answer those curiosity questions, just try something new. Ideas that they want to try, they're now getting much quicker answers to those curiosity questions, to whether they work or have answered their curiosity. So what's next? We're still very much in the building phase. We have a very aggressive plan to get more dashboards out to various departments. So supply chain in particular is very key, warehousing, logistics, finance and human resources, to name but a few. We want to include more of our data. We want to bring that more of our data sources into the Collect platform where we can. We're also considering a supplier performance dashboard. So when we have account review meetings with our various suppliers, that actually we can show how their product range is performing, and give them access to that and manipulate it for themselves. And they can provide additional marketing support, perhaps change the range or make suggestions about different products that might work for us. And we're going to continue to expose the BI to the business, more teams. As we grow more dashboards into various departments in the business, we can then start to grow the number of users. So yeah, we're very excited. We're working with Collect and the Looker team. We've still got a long road ahead of us, but we feel we're making huge inroads, and we've achieved a lot in the last 10 months, more than we probably thought we would. So we're very excited to see where we go with it, and what we can do with it.
That's great. Thanks, Damien. That's really good. So if there's any questions for Damien, which I'm sure there will be, we'll come back to those at the end in the Q&A. But otherwise, I'll pass back to Andy.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Damien. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much indeed. What we're actually going to do is, we've had loads of questions come into the Q&A. So what I'm going to suggest is that we summarise those and we send responses back out to everybody who's attended. We've had in excess of 12 questions, so I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of those at the Q&A at the end. So I'm going to hand over to our final speakers, to Tom and to Ed, and they can help us to understand the journey they've been through together as Hyper and Studio Retail. Thanks, guys.
Hi guys, the perils of dual screening means that as soon as I shared my screen, then I couldn't show myself. Right. Right, hopefully we can see the slides there. Right, afternoon everybody, and thanks for joining. To echo everybody else's sentiment, I think interesting last talk there, and we're going to echo a lot of what was discussed in that presentation. I think as part of it, my lasting memory of that presentation is that I'm definitely going to take up wood turning, certainly in lockdown, and I will be definitely buying the Evolution SK114 from Axminster to enable that, which is an infinitely better product than the previous model of the SK113. So that's certainly something that I've taken up. But yeah, but by way of introduction, so I'm here with Studio today, and Ed Child, who I'll introduce in a second, but we're going to talk through building a data science incubator, and how that's helped Studio accelerate their data solutions. So a quick introduction to Hyper before I hand over. So we're an agency partner for Studio and Collect, as you've heard, and we deliver data science and AI solutions for retail and consumer-facing clients. And we set up the business really because we felt like we kept hearing businesses talk about being customer-centric and data-driven, and a lot of businesses weren't. So we saw an opportunity to leverage customer and click data in the main, but also technology platforms that we have created, which make that really simple and easy to execute. So we've supported Studio with their data science incubator. So I'll hand over to Ed Child, who's head of enterprise data now, and he's going to talk to you about through the data vision at Studio and how we've helped and support them.
Hi there guys, hopefully you can hear me. So yeah, hi, my name's Ed Child, so I head up the enterprise data team at Studio. I've been part of Studio now for 16 months, and I'm here to kind of lead Studio on its data transformation. So first of all, just if you haven't heard of Studio, we're a e-commerce retailer based in the Northwest. A bit on Studio's background and heritage. So we're formed in 1955. We have a rich heritage in catalogue retailing. We do a lot of product personalisation. If you want your name printed on a product, we can pretty much do it. We evolved to a kind of credit offer in the sort of mid-1990s, and we've now transition to being a e-commerce retailer. So we're fortunate enough to have been one of the winners through kind of like COVID. So e-commerce is a fortunate place to like be. So we're seeing over 30% year-on-year growth. So we're very grateful to be in the right industry at the right time. And we serve about 2 million customers per year. I think it's fair to say that Studio is a business which has historically treated data as a byproduct and more us kind of forwards and use it as a strategic asset. So that's a bit on Studio. So yeah, over 90% of our sales come through online now. We have an app. An app makes up over like 20% of our sales. So we've been on a really rapid and digital transformation. Next slide, please, Tom. So obviously we kind of love data. So my role here is to help us make data guided decisions. So data will like help educate us. So we have a fantastic opportunity. We're incredibly rich in first party data. So we have customers transacting on our websites. We send out, we use a lot of digital marketing. We send out a lot of emails. We still send out a lot of catalogs and direct mail. We've got opportunity to link all this up together to really get a 360-degree view of the customer. And it's my role to like try and bring all of this information together. So if we can take all of this rich first-party data, browsing data, and then move on to actually linking it to our sales and our transaction and customer experience, that's where we can get massive business benefit. Next slide, please. So Tom assures me that these memes are very culturally relevant, and apparently it's Drake. I'm not cool enough to know because I'm a data person, so apologies. But so our kind of business challenge has been that essentially we're not uncommon through having we are a legacy retailer with a rich heritage, but that does mean we have some siloed data. It does mean we have some legacy systems, and our analytics tooling and capability isn't quite where we want to be. So you can see that Drake's not very pleased with that, which I'm not either. But actually, he's super chuffed with the work that we're doing in our data science incubator. And I think this is all about going, my role is to come here and help us transform, but I have to keep delivering business value. So I've got a huge amount of work to do on this top box. So I'm really pleased with the work that we've done with Method, which has helped us with how can we actually show the value of our investments in big data and data science. So the data science incubator was born earlier this year.
They say that data isn't cool, Ed, but I definitely think we are as cool as Drake, and we are down with the kids using memes in our presentation.
Couldn't have said it better, Tom. Thank you. So how are we doing this? So what I'm really pushing forward is a lab and factory approach at Studio. So what the data science incubator has been is all about how can we take some really fast steps forward in creating a lab. So we're not ready for internal data scientists yet. So I've got some other kind of work to do in fixing our data foundations, but I'm really keen on building labs and building the right environment for us to really crunch and smash all of our really kind of good and exciting big data, and then go, how can I create capability for us to then transition away from labs and build all of this cool stuff into our factory. Our factory is probably not quite as exciting as the picture on the right, but the lab on the left is definitely spot on. I think Tom assures me this is what the data science incubator looks like. So I'm now going to pass back over to Tom, who's going to talk through exactly what we've built.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what is this lab that we've created? Does it contain test tubes, Bunsen burners, and are we setting light to magnesium to make flares within it? The answer to that is no. We've heard a similar story just around how we can get that data into a place where it enables decision making. So what the lab in essence is it's a performance data science incubator, which combines all of Studio's disparate data sources together. So customer, marketing campaigns, clicks, financial services, and the interaction with that across many other areas. And it brings it together in one place. It's kind of your old fashioned single customer view. But that ability to look at things and much more data in one place. So an ETL batch process that we've created, which ingests that data in. We've sat it in Snowflake. The ability to dial up and dial down querying speeds we think are really important to the use cases and types of things that we're working on with Studio. And then we have access to all of the sort of modern machine learning and analytics languages available within there. So we can carry out those experiments and create all of these models for machine learning. And then finally, sort of visualizing that information. So it's all well and good doing the analysis, doing the work, but then helping the business understand what it means. So we've sat Power BI on top of that because that's the route that Studio are going internally, and we want to make sure that it's aligned with that. And it means that we can create sort of visualizations and dashboards to support the delivery of the information and insight that we have out. And there are various applications. So marketing being an obvious one around that customer and click data and being personalized and targeted, but also, and a critical point, and again, you heard it within Axminster, is product, and getting product right for Studio is massively critical. And that's part of the work that we've done with them. So what is the reason for the data science incubator and why work with Hyper to deliver it? So what that enables is automation of process. So we can automate processes for Studio, and that frees up their time for their analysts to be looking at the important things for the business. I think Ed will admit that because of the way in which the data is structured and the sort of internally, people are having to combine lots of data sources, pull them in from different areas, and carry out quite a lot of analysis that's manual and takes time. And what we need to do is free up those people to be focused on recommending changes as a result of the analysis and insight, rather than doing the handle turning to create it. And ultimately then give the data back in a more powerful way. So that 360-degree view of the customer. And that enables solutions around making sure that product is customer centric, and that we are aligning the right products to the right people, and getting that right. And then Hyper's role. So we provide consultancy expertise and hands on the ground, boots on the ground. What's that right? Whatever that saying is, to support Studio with specific problems in that lab environment. So we can create data models, do machine learning, carry out those sort of big projects, and then hand them back into the factory so they can be automated and then run within the business. And just an example, so we'll talk you through a bit of a case study and an example of that, something that we've worked on. So we went through a process of understanding what the priorities were for Studio within leveraging data. And really they came down to making sure that they ticked one of three boxes to do that. So enable better buying by understanding customer interactions with products. So making sure that the product that Studio put in front of the customers is what they want and they're going to love and engage with. Deliver better customer experiences. So what are the key things that matter to the customers, and how can Studio do a good job of dialing those up? What's less important and expensive, so that Studio can dial those down and make sure that they're giving that absolute value through product, which is one of Studio's absolute sort of USPs. And then finally, driving engagement. So by being relevant to the customer in every interaction. And this comes back down to that, making sure that we're putting the right product in front of the right person at the right time. And one of the things that we did to start that off was to work with B&M. And B&M and Studio historically had been a catalogue company that looked to range their products based on a book that would go out to their customers. And obviously the world's moved from there, and we're now a digital retailer. And so how do we adjust and adapt the data capability to support a digital ranging and information? And it all comes down to customer-centric metrics for B&M. So understanding a loyal customers interacting with products. So where that's really key to making sure that Studio do a great job for their loyal customers, we keep those products in the range. So on and so forth. What products are really important to the credit proposition? So again, making sure that people that want that credit proposition and the financial services element, the products that suit that are front and center for those customers. And then a Power BI sort of front end to that, which we can sort of visualization there, which enable us to see that data, to give that tool and put it in the hands of the buyer so they can look at their customer data with regards to the products that they're buying. And use that on a day-to-day basis, which is critical, because there's one thing us having that in the lab and creating that and providing insight, but having the buyers being able to just access that on a daily basis when they need to make a product decision, the information's there, and that's an example of pushing it back into the factory and surfacing those insights for the business. So I'll just drop back over to Ed, who's going to talk a little bit about the future for where we want to take data in Studio, and then we'll give our sort of closing thoughts.
So I'm very conscious we've only got a few minutes left, so I will keep this really kind of short, but I'm really kind of confident that we're on the kind of start of a awesome transformation journey where we are genuinely going to put data at the heart of the organisation for like Studio, and these are like some of the kind of key kind of boxes for me for how we're actually going to get there. And I'm just really pleased with the work that we've done with Method specifically, which allows me to show the value of data to the organisation, because any data leader will be faced with multiple challenges of fixing lots of things, but it's really important to be also look at how we can deliver tangible value. So for me, it's all about going, how can we make kind of make data Studio's superpower? So I think I'll probably stop there because we've only got a couple of minutes left and hand back over.
Yeah, good stuff. So, I mean, thanks, Ed, and thanks for joining us on this. But I guess from our perspective, just in terms of closing thoughts, what you've heard in the last two presentations is that speed to insight and the speed of accessing data. And making data science accessible can be accelerated and supported by working with this type of model. And we think certainly at Hyper that the tools that you put on top of that to enable retail and consumer facing organizations to be customer centric and data driven is what we aspire to and what we try to deliver for our clients, and how we've supported Studio within that. So we'll stop sharing and I guess hand back to Andy.
Cheers, Tom. Thanks, Ed. That was really useful. Thanks so much. So I'd just like to thank all of our panelists today. I think that we've covered some really interesting ground, and importantly, as a former CIO in a retail business, actually some practical application as to how it can be done. It's all well and good talking about the theory, but how you actually execute and deliver results is the most important thing. And both Damien and Ed, supported by Tom and James, have brought that to life for us. And Ian's book, The Average is Always Wrong, encapsulates the very essence of how it can be achieved. And it doesn't have to cost a disproportionate amount of money. There is real value that can be accessed very quickly and perpetually. So I'd just like to thank everybody again for joining. We've had loads of questions, literally. So what we'll do as a follow-up is we will publish the link to the presentation afterwards, and we will ask our panelists to support us in responding to the questions that you've raised. But on behalf of Collect and Hyper, Studio and Axminster Tools, thanks very much indeed for your participation today. We hope you found it useful. Thank you.